Good morning, Nigeria. Welcome to Daybreak on Trust Television, reaching you live from the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Ayubelia.
It's a beautiful morning here indeed. Hopefully the same for you out there. Thanks for joining us on Daybreak today. I am Zainab Bala.
Now, the Daybreak brings you analysis and perspectives on recent happenings around the country every weekday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And we are super excited to have you join us today on the show.
Today is World Audiovisual Heritage Day, an occasion to raise general awareness of the need to take urgent measures and to acknowledge the importance of audiovisual documents. Wow.
You know, when you talk about audiovisual, then immediately my mind goes back to the megaphone, the cassettes, you know,
Quite funny at that time.
Yeah, really. And if you look at how we have evolved over time, you know, with these gadgets and all of that, you see that we've made quite significant progress in that regard. Before, you have very large, very heavy, large and big television screens, you know, and all of that. But now you have a very light, you know, flat screen TVs, and you could do everything virtually from the same device, you know, on the same TV screen. You can go to the internet, you know, you can even access your phone, you know.
Exactly.
So the world has really,
pocket, you can do
really evolved. The black and white TV then, I recall. And for those in the media, they can say, you know, they can tell better how much, you know, has changed and how much the journalism has been impacted positively by virtue of the evolution of these gadgets. You know, you look at, you know, the sourcing of news. Before, you have to go use a typewriter and all of that. But now, from your phone, on the spot, from wherever you are, you can just send, you know, information. So quite a lot has changed, really.
Right.
Yeah, but we'll look at that much later. Let's talk about other things. Now, on Daybreak today, Nigerians groan as prices of foodstuff reaches decade-high cost as consumer demand increases. Other foodstuffs like fish, chicken, and milk remain volatile. What is really going on? Now, to find answers to all of that, Samson Galadima, an economist, will join us to discuss this.
For now, let's take a look at the events of 27th October in world history.
Well, there you have it today in history. Quite a lot there. We've already touched on one of them. And one other issue that is, you know, of great relevance to our history as a people, as citizens of the world, is the release of Martin Luther King from prison. Now, on 27th of October in 1960, Martin Luther was released from prison. He was a civil rights leader, and he was released from the Georgia State Prison following a direct intervention from Robert F. Kennedy, who had questioned his constitutional rights to bail while pending appeal of a traffic conviction. Very interesting, you know, the role of Martin Luther King as an activist in changing the narrative in the United States. You know, if you look at the issues of racism at the time, how that black people could not do certain things, there are designated places that only whites could access, and then for colored and all of that. But that began to change with people like Martin Luther King, and it's quite significant how much he has contributed. In fact, without a Martin Luther King, maybe we wouldn't have had a Barack Obama as a president.
Exactly. You know, at that time they used to call them Negroes. And, that changed over time and has given black people, more voice, to be in government, politics and all of that. So my thing is seen, as an icon for the black people.
Yes, he is. Well, we'll now move on to the other segments of the show, and that's Dailies on Daybreak. We have Abdulaziz, Deputy General Editor, in the studio to review some of the stories that made the headlines here on Daybreak. Let's go on this quick break, and then when we come back, we'll take a look at the papers.
But in a situation where you find that they must look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television. It's now time for us to review the papers making headlines this morning, starting with the Daily Trust newspaper. Right on page 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper, you'd find Paris Club refund would not accept arbitrary deductions from federal government. That's according to governors. And on page 27 of the Daily Trust newspaper, you'd also find it's illegal for federal government to pay fuel subsidy from Federation account. That's according to Sanusi. And an exclusive here, which is a big story for the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, states bandits impose levies on Sokoto communities, issue ultimatum for payment. And a rider is saying residents don't trust security agents, opt for payments. Another rider is saying police state government mom. Ex-local government chair warns against compliance. You'd also find how rival fight claimed notorious Zamfara bandit Damina dozens more. You'd find that story on page 5 of the Daily Trust newspaper. And right still on page 5, you'd see abductions. Over 12 million children traumatized, afraid of going to school. That's according to President Muhammadu Buhari. And on page 6, Buhari's exit will end Nigeria's crisis. That's according to Afeni Fere. And on page 6, you'd see vigilantes kill village head brother in Niger. And you would find a pictorial there with Chief of Army Staff Farouk Yahya, and others at the NSA office in Abuja yesterday. And on page 40 of the Daily Trust newspaper, you'd also find anxiety as appeal court delivers ruling on Secondo's suit tomorrow. These are some of the stories you'd find on the Daily Trust newspaper.
All right. Let's take a look at the Nation newspaper on the Daybreak today. Now, the first story on the Nation newspaper says how we are attracting investors by Buhari. You'd find that on page 5. And then governors to boost Amotekun Odua investment. The writer says people's welfare priority. That's also on page 5. 3.35 trillion naira spent on agri imports in 4 years. Conflicting court orders, NBA raises probe panel. And then you would see also the pictorial there, and then below that, petrol subsidy stays till June 2022, says Minister, with a rider 714 billion naira paid in 7 months. Convention anxiety in PDP over tomorrow's ruling in Secondo's suit. The lead story on the Nation, deduction row with federal government, governors reject allocation. Payment to Paris Club loan consultants sparks dispute. These are the major stories on the Nation today.
Okay, let's take a look at the stories on the Punch newspaper. This morning, you'd find on page 21, power, poor transportation, port facilities killing Nigeria's manufacturers. That's according to Adishina. You'd also see NNPC marketers inflated imported petrol figures under Buhari Jonathan. That's according to Sanusi. And you'd also find PEN come to prosecute errant employers, recovers 19.29 billion pensions. You'd also see the very big headline on the Punch newspaper. Federal government lists designees buildings, juries, bras for sale, values bodies mansions. That's quite an interesting story to read. And then a writer is saying suspects, wedding gowns, invisible bras, 64 pairs of shoes for sale. 1,620 items, including cars, houses, phones, laptops, vessels, also listed. And then you would find a pictorial there of retirees in Osun State pleading for understanding at the State Secretariat in Osun State. You'd also see Buhari's exit in 2023, solution to Nigeria's problems. That's according to Afenifere. So these are some of the major stories on the Punch newspaper.
All right. Let's take a look at the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. Southwest governors meet over security situation in region. Others. You would see also below the nameplate, insecurity, corps members undergo martial arts training for self-defense. Interesting. I would love to be part of that, although I'm no longer
We didn't have that
eligible to serve. And the lead story there says 2023, PDP won't zone presidency. That's according to Saraki, with a rider hints of defection of APC bigwigs to opposition party. Appeal court rules on Seconder's case tomorrow. You'd find that on page 6 and 27. Beside the pictorial on the Daily Sun, Bauchi PDP demands probe of Justice Usman by NJC. That's on page 27. E-Naira will tackle illicit flow of funds, says federal government. NDIC boss declares Nigerian banking industry safe. Recall that there's a whole lot of skepticism, and panicking from the banking sector regarding the e-Naira launch by the federal government. The next story there, Red Cross puts cholera deaths in Nigeria at 3,208 in 10 months. Begins emergency relief action in Bayelsa, Sokoto, Katsina, Kebbi, Gombe. And then you would also see we will end casualization of workers, says Labour Minister. Rather says government sets up 2022 ending for salary harmonization. That's on page 8. Nigeria's per capita income static in 40 years, says World Bank. That's on page 25. You can get more details on that. That's really not surprising. I mean, if you look at other indices regarding Nigeria's economic growth and all of that. Petrol subsidy to go June 2022. That's the federal government. Below the pictorial, alleged terrorism, UN rides Nigeria, Kenya over Kanu. At the very bottom, aviation stakeholders hail Ugwai for commitment to air safety. That's on page 6 of the Daily Sun. And I think that's about the last. Okay, we still have the Guardian newspaper this morning. Now let's take a look at some stories on the Guardian.
Okay, right on the Guardian newspaper, the lead story there says weak export capacity undermines proceeds from Naira devaluation. You'd also see safe schools, over 12 million children traumatized, afraid to go to school, says President Muhammadu Buhari. You'd also find on page 5 of the Guardian newspaper, arrest Gumi as bandits leader, PFN tells President Muhammadu Buhari. You'd also see on page 7, UN writes Nigeria, Kenya, demands explanation on Kanu's abduction, extradition. Oh, wow. That's quite interesting.
Interesting, really, very, very interesting stories. Well, let's get perspectives from our reviewer in the studio, Abdulaziz. Abdulaziz is the Deputy General Editor, Daily Trust newspaper, to review the stories that made the headlines. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, we'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. Quite interesting stories there. The lead story talks about bandits imposing levies on Sokoto communities, issue ultimatum for payment and all of that. This looks like, I would say, it has a semblance with the modus operandi, if you like, of the terrorist group in the northeast, Boko Haram.
Yeah, that's true. And honestly, this is also not the first time we are seeing this trend, even from the bandits, because in the past we have reported, especially the Daily Trust has reported about similar demands by bandits operating in places like Brunungwari in Kaduna State and some parts of Zamfara as well. So, of course, as you said, it feels like the similar modus operandi that we've seen with Boko Haram and ISWAP in the northeast, and it's more importantly points to the increasing hopelessness and increasing security challenge that is not only worrisome in the sense that it is showing that these places are now governed by these people, because anyone who can impose tax or levy and then follow it up to ensure that it is paid, then it means that he's taking the responsibility or the duties of governance. Governance has been subverted and taken over by these criminals, and which is quite unfortunate, and more so because these places are largely farming communities in which the people are really very poor, poorest of the poor, and now for them to even access their farms, for them to even live, it has to be taxed. That is really a bad situation, and it shows that we still have a long way to go in containing this issue of banditry.
Okay. Now, you mentioned hopelessness, of the people. And we're seeing that residents don't trust agents and they are opting, for these payments. Why is that?
Yeah, that's exactly the issue of hopelessness, because in many of these communities, the people feel that, the capacity of the security forces to really protect the citizens is very weak. And that is why, even if they don't want to pay, if you see, I have seen that another rider there is saying ex-local government chair warning that they should not comply. But the issue is, people may not, it's just a choice between a rock and a hard surface. So the people have to make one choice, and usually if they choose not to pay, they are not sure, and that is the issue of the trust that you asked about on the security forces. If they choose not to pay, it also would, it will also mean that they are choosing insecurity over security, because they are not sure that the security forces have the capacity and the will to really protect them from these marauders, these people that are out there and ready to attack them.
And it's beginning to look like somehow we've settled for these ungoverned spaces and accepted that it's not possible to deploy troops, to those areas. Is that correct? Because how do we overcome or how do we defeat the bandits, if we do not have sufficient deployments of security forces in some of these ungoverned spaces?
You're absolutely correct in this, especially with your last comment. It's not really easy. And the places are very vast, especially this area. A lot of people don't know the extent or how vast these areas are, and vis-a-vis the inadequacies, especially the shortage of manpower, which is true. Policymakers, everybody knows. For example, the whole size of Nigeria, over 2 million, people, and in terms of the landmass and all that. But you find out that our security forces are maybe not more than 1% of our population. No country, operates in that way. Because, like, for example, the whole police is not up to 500,000. The whole army, how much is it? Around 300,000. So this is a very serious issue. And added to this is also the extent of the conflicts, internal crisis we are having. The security forces are spread too thinly across the country. We have ongoing operation in the northeast. It's not over. We have this crisis in the northeast and parts of northwest and part of north central. You have the security challenges in the northeast. So all these are issues that require active security operations, while the numbers are somehow not there. Yeah. And as I said, the vastness, like for example, Burning it's alone. People don't know. Burning alone in Kaduna State is twice the size of Lagos. So that shows you, that gives you an idea about how these places are. From if you straddle from Niger going into Zamfara to Sokoto State, Kebbi, Katsina, these are massive places. And even, for example, if you take Borno State, the size of Borno is big. So the numbers, and that is why a lot of times experts have emphasized the need of going technological with this fight. Because, of course, technology is giving us a way around figures. So if you don't have the numbers, you can improvise, you can get the technology to do the work for you.
Okay. Now, in recent times we have seen, schools being attacked. Our schools are not safe anymore. And then recently on The Guardian, I'm seeing this morning, President Muhammadu Buhari is issuing a statement saying children are traumatized and they can't go to school anymore. Many would say, as a president, that shouldn't come from him, but we should see a form of response, to the whole situation.
Yes or no. Yes, in a sense that, yes, people expect action, not talks from leaders. But also, I think, especially depending on the context, I cannot speak of the context where he spoke. I think it's also not a bad idea. It's also part of leadership to give update on situations in the country. So in that sense, then I think it's fair. It's not out of place for the president to speak about these out-of-school children. As you said, the trend of school abduction, we've seen it move from the northeast to northwest, and even in the north and in the northwest, we've seen too much of it. Right. Because, like from the first school abduction recorded in December 2019 in Kankara in Katsina State, we've recorded like at least 4 or 5 others. That is to Jengebe in Zamfara State, the school in Niger, 2 schools in Niger State have been attacked, about 2 others in Zamfara, and and about 3 also in Kaduna State. So within this 10 months of the year, we've seen like abductions in nearly 10 schools, and this is quite disheartening and of course quite discouraging. And I'm not surprised with the figures coming out, because in a lot of places we're aware that schools have been closed down because of fears of attack. In some places, parents have withdrawn their children from schools because they are not comfortable of their safety, especially boarding schools.
Right.
All right. Now let's take a look at other stories here. That we are now seeing this Paris Club discussion again. The Nation leads with the story: deduction row with federal government. Governors reject allocation. Payments to Paris Club loan consultant sparks dispute. Again, this issue is resurfacing. Take us through the bone of contention here.
Well, this Paris Club thing is very interesting, and it's actually, to be frank, in itself a very good example of how governance in Nigeria is been done, and how people in positions can do things a lot of times out of their own benefit, and also how money, as they say, is the root of all evils. So this is just statements. So going into the issues, all this, that is what you are seeing on the paper today, started from 2006 when the federal government paid, negotiated debt relief with the global lenders, especially the Paris Club, and they say, okay, give us certain amount of money, and then we write off what Nigeria was owing. So in doing that, the federal government now removed money from the federation account, and much later, some states started agitating that we are overcharged, or some of us have not even benefited from the loan. Then you shouldn't have cut the money across from, because of course, as we know, a federation account belongs to everybody. So why would you remove my money, his money, and her money when only the two of them actually took these loans? Or even in taking the loan, we are overcharged because our own debt is not up to the deduction made. And that went on for a while until the coming of President Muhammadu Buhari, and I think in in late 2015, the president was convinced to make this refund to the state. That's why you hear Paris Club refund. So they now started this refund to the state, which went into billions actually of dollars. And then, and my comment around that is, you see, most of this money, you don't even know where it went to.
Right.
A lot of states, receive billions of naira as part of this Paris Club refund outside their normal allocation, which is supposed to be like some bumper harvest that could have been used for something good. But a lot of them saw it as freebies that they just spent on other things. So that's aside. Now, some consultants purportedly said, that we worked to ensure that you guys got these refunds, and therefore we are entitled to a cut from it, our service charges. And of course, initially there was payment to a section of the consultants, which also generated another scandal on its own, which was a subject of EFCC investigation from 2016-17, leading to arrest and interrogation of some powerful people, though of course no one has been charged to court. But now some other consultant now resurface to say, we did this same, we worked to ensure that this thing came out, so we are entitled to be paid. And what are they demanding? $480 million. That is a lot of money. And then there has been back and forth between the federal government and states being coordinated by the Nigerian Governors Forum about what to do with this situation. And states kept insisting that we don't know these guys, or actually the services they claim to have rendered is false, or that we have not entered into a contractual agreement, or, they disputed the claims. Some of the consultants went to court. I think some of them have gotten judgment. And then there was the talk of out-of-court settlement, which the Attorney General now went into with some of the consultants, and that's where you arrive at the payment of $480 million. And of course, the governors are now pushing back. On Monday, Daily Trust reported it off, that 33 states may not pay salary because of this. Because when they met last week, because this has been a subject of controversy, litigation, and all that. But then when they came for FAC meeting, that is Federal Allocation meeting that they do monthly in Abuja with Commissioners of Finance, last week, they were told, we have so amount of money had been deducted to start payment to this consultant. And the Commissioners of Finance protested of course, maybe acting on the behalf of their
Yeah,
bosses,
absolutely.
that we will not take anything because we have not authorized deduction. Why will you deduct at source to pay these guys? So now this is where we are.
Okay. I think in August, if I can remember vividly, we saw governors denying and saying they didn't receive any Paris Club fund.
Well, I cannot remember seeing that, but I don't think it's true because maybe the controversy was around the consultancy thing also. The first batch, which I told you was a subject of EFCC investigation, because a lot of things also were modeled up. There were allegations of bribery, that some people took money on some behalf of some people. But essentially, what I told you is what happened with the Paris Club and states. I think it's not all the states, but the exceptions is quite a few. And also the money varied because it was based on a calculation of what was deducted from the federation account at that time and what was supposed to be due to these states, that was repaid.
Now, tied to this is the issue of, revenue generation in the states. How sustainable is this behavior of, coming to the federal government, taking an allocation, and then going back to the state, and then it continues like a ritual, and you do not necessarily see how that internally generated revenue in most of the states is, boosted, is increased, by virtue of maybe some kind of capital investment and all of that. How sustainable is this culture?
Well, actually, this is a subject of a very long debate across lines because, in fact, it is at the center of the restructuring debate. That a lot of people say, let's restructure, let's have states to be a bit more independent, also a bit more in charge of their resources, so that states can live according to their sizes. What I mean is that states who can generate money on their own should, to do other things, not to depend on some handout coming from the federal government through the FAC. And of course, just like oil made Nigeria or Nigerians lazy, the FAC allocation, the monthly handout that states take from Abuja, has made most of them lazy in terms of exploring other revenue sources, because Nigeria is rich and Nigerian states are quite endowed, but we don't explore those endowments, those natural endowments, and on other things like, for example, taxes, because you see that in many states they don't care even about maximizing their revenue potentials in terms of IGR. We know if you look at Nigeria, almost every state has one or more competitive advantage that it can drive, that it can latch on and get more revenue. But because of this handout, states are weak. And also, it's become, as we've seen recently, especially in the last year or two, it's become a very serious political issue, in the sense that people driving for or against restructuring are largely taking this revenue dependency or revenue independence as the benchmark, as the marker, because and therefore the line is drawn. For example, states who feel they are buoyant, largely the southern states feel, we have to restructure and make states take charge of control their resources, this and that. But the perhaps more, I wouldn't say poor, but lazy states in the south, in the north, always push back to argue against such mechanisms. But by and large, I think it's very important that states become much more independent in terms of revenue generating, because when you do that, you develop at your own pace. One, secondly, you also the responsibility also increases, because if people feel they are responsible to citizens who pay taxes or who know where this money is from, they will perhaps be more accountable. Because if you look at it now, average citizen has only a notion of what this money is, this public money. And that's one of the most important challenges, even in terms of fighting corruption in Nigeria, because Nigerians are not organically attached to the resources that are being spent by government.
Right.
So people feel that it's government money, so it's public fund. So it's like, because they don't contribute, they don't have like serious attachment mentally to this money, because it's just like something that is hazy in the clouds. Somebody comes to Abuja, collects allocation and go to the state, spend it anyhow they want it. But if you and I know that visibly and we come to that realization that it is because the government, every month I pay 5,000 or every month I pay 100 naira, that is what the government is being run on. Even the demand for accountability, I always say that, even the demand for accountability will increase.
Yes, but what could be responsible for this attitude? Could it be that maybe some Nigerians do not, like for instance, if you talk about the number of Nigerians or the percentage of Nigerians that are captured, that are paying tax, to the government, do you think that has an influence on the way people behave towards government funds and how attached they are to the issues of government money?
Yeah, it does. That's exactly what I was explaining. It does, because in as much as natural resources also belongs to you and I, people largely, because it's not like they are not the one mining, whether it is solid minerals or the crude oil. So they don't have that direct attachment of it. Tax is where, and that is why not only in nations, but even in associations, contributing financially to it makes one have a sense of belonging, make one, bold enough to demand for actions, to demand for changes, and to demand for accountability. But if all one does or all one sees is some things happening almost independent of him, it detaches one to this. Because even if you are revenue rich, that's financial obligation to the country in terms of taxes is important, because as I said, it improves demand for accountability and also gives people more stake, or the feeling of more stake. But of course, having said that, it doesn't mean that this money is not our own. It's our money, because we are all Nigerians. Everybody is just like a susu or something like that we are staking. So everybody has a piece, even if you don't own land in practical. In theory, we all have a piece of Nigeria to ourselves. So if we donate that power, that pieces we have, to another person to manage it for us, or some group of people to manage it, it's of course absolutely responsible thing to do is to manage it well and account to us.
Very true.
I think another story, of interest is the one on the Punch newspaper, where it states federal government lists Dizani's building, jewelry, brass for sale, values Badi's mansions. Well, some would say it's been quite silent, on the Dizani case over the years. But seeing this now, can you just walk us through, the whole Dizani situation?
Well, asset forfeiture and asset disposal in terms of fighting corruption is one vast and complicated area, because this is talking generally beyond the designing issue, because these assets have been there confiscated like 3-4 years ago, but nothing has been done. Some people will ask, why are these assets there? Because, there has to be process of the courts, getting to the courts to get court orders to temporarily forfeit the assets and then to permanently forfeit them. To temporarily forfeit them means to say that the government is declaring that these assets are proceeds of crime or corruption. But if you feel that it's not true, or if you feel it belongs to you legitimately, you should come forward and explain how you get it. So if you don't, then they forfeit it to the government. That is one aspect of asset forfeiture. It also comes sometimes in attached cases. That is when somebody is taken to court and it goes with the person. Because that's what we call non-conviction based asset forfeiture. That is the first one I explained. That is, you apply just the asset to say, okay, I have seen this house in Metama, for example, and I feel that is the proceed of crime. Anybody who believes that it's not should come forward and prove otherwise. That's non-conviction asset forfeiture. But the conviction-based asset forfeiture, that is the one that you take the person to court with the asset as evidence. So it has to pass through a very usually long process up to the Supreme Court until the case is completely dispensed.
Isn't that long process the problem here? I mean, the president has expressed, frustration over the processes of our court as to, helping with the fight against corruption. And
that's
all
exactly the point. Yeah, that. So the process is not as easy as we may think. So it takes a long time. But that's aside. Now, I think it's good what the government is now doing. The only thing is we should demand, as usual, with Nigeria, what should be given, that is transparency. That these assets should be transparently dispensed of so that we get value for them. We don't get the assets looted. I'm using looted not in the sense of crude direct stealing, but to show that sometimes asset can be sold, but in a giveaway price that only it's literally like giving them away or looting them away. So we hope that all the assets listed for sale will be sold in a very objective, transparent manner, so that at least Nigerians can get some level of retribution, what is called retribution in the language of anti-corruption fight. That is to get something from that crime committed. So,
all right. Now, another story that has dominated the political sphere is the story about the zoning. We are seeing boldly written on the Sun newspaper, for instance, this morning, that the PDP won't zone presidency in 2023, according to the former Senate President Saraki. Now, this is a big conversation, isn't it, about whether the presidency should be zoned or not. How important is this discussion about zoning?
Yeah, as you said, it's a conversation that has been on for a while and will continue to be there, because I remember when we interviewed former Jigawa State Governor Sule Lamido a few months back. He said that zoning had a purpose, and the purpose was to mend fences and carry people along. And he said it shouldn't be in perpetuity, that is, it shouldn't be forever. But then if we feel that those wounds are still not healed, then we should continue to zone. So what does that mean? It means that I don't see it ending, actually. I mean, the demand for zoning, because as Nigerians, the wounds that Lamido was speaking about, the issue of national unity, is still not there. So we still first see Saraki as a Yoruba person from the north, a northern minority, if you like. And then we first see Jonathan, for example, as an Ijaw man from the south. So in as much as we are looking at people from where they come from, not from what they are as individuals, then we will continue to have this zoning debate, because it has been a successful political tool for a very long time, even prior to the return of democracy in 1999.
Yes.
And only yesterday I was watching a viral video, that resurfaced of some statement made by the late head of state, General Sani Abacha, in which he was talking about this exact problem, about how he was feeling that microzoning the country into these geopolitical zones will help to address these agitations of dominations, of marginalization. Because, like, what happened immediately after he died, immediately Obasanjo came. By 2000, people had already started complaining just 1 year into Obasanjo's administration that, oh, the North is being marginalized and we need to have a northern person to take over power.
Now, how do you see these conversations, influencing, the division that we are seeing in the country? Does it influence?
Yeah, it does, seriously. In fact, it inflames. And funny enough, is that this debate, or not even the debate, even the reality of the zoning, does not, in tangible terms, amount to anything to the common person. But the political class have always used it as a tool to inflame public conversation and therefore maybe have their way, just for personal reasons. For example, I was telling someone recently that I had been to Bielsa when Jonathan was president, and I didn't see any Jonathan presence on the street of Bielsa. I was only recently in Daura for a walk, and you couldn't say like, okay, this is the president's hometown. So a lot of it is just the notion of power. In as much as I believe that psychological satisfaction is needed just to give people some level of sense of belonging. But the way it is being whipped as a political tool is totally unfair to this country, because, as I said, we will continue on this for a long time. That is, people will always resort back to this zoning, which was the reason, as Lamido was saying in that interview, for the maybe founding fathers of PDP to, in 1998, sit down to say, okay, let's just to placate the Southwest, let's give them this thing.
But how do we move away from this?
That's what I'm saying. Two things. One is we have to, and of course, I don't see it happening in anytime soon, but we have to move away from that debate, honestly, because it is a deliberate, sentimental debate where such a political class always resort to, which is also, unfortunately, is a sweet music to the ears of the common man, and that is what usually will spark the debate, and everybody will be talking, oh, we are marginalized, we need to be zoned, this thing has to be zoned to us. But talking about the PDP, though, from the context of PDP and 2023, which I think we have not addressed based on what Saraki, I think, said, though of course I have not read the story. It's interesting that the PDP is having a very tough time deciding on this zoning thing, and also taking a position on it, because from what I know, the party is divided. There are those who say, oh, we have not, the last person we gave our ticket, of course, is a northerner, but the last president we produced is from the south. And the only fair thing to do is to, but also Buhari is from the north. He's just about to spend his 8th year tenure. He's been there for 8 years. So it's not fair, even though Buhari is not from our party, but it's not fair to disregard the fact that he's from the north and give another northerner the ticket. But some people feel, but if we are talking of winning election, we should go to where the votes are. And that is one of the raging things. So as somebody put it to me once, that is a debate between moralists and rationalists. Moralists who feel it's morally wrong to have another succeed Buhari after 8 years, and rationalists who feel that perhaps the only way the PDP, as Dopesi recently said, the AIT founder, that the only way for PDP to maintain or to get the presidency is actually by fielding a northerner. But also, one interesting issue to all this is the power play, the blocks, because we have the southern governors had come out in July to say that power must shift, whatever party it is, to the south, which of course later the northern governors met and also countered. And also there is the pull-push thing within. Some powerful persons who have maybe ambitions, maybe people like Saraki and Atiku Abubakar and maybe Governor Wike and the rest, are also trying to position themselves, trying to ensure that the cards are played, in a way that it will favor them. So we watch to see.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts with us on this segment of the show. We've been speaking with Abdulaziz Abdulaziz. He is the Deputy General Editor, Daily Trust newspaper, giving us perspectives on the stories that made the headlines this morning. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much.
I hope to have you next time.
Sure, thank you.
All right. Now, we'll be going on a quick break, and then when we come back, we will take a look at other discussions that borders on the economy. Nigerians have continued to to groan, over the rising costs of living in the country. We'll be joined by an economist who will be giving us perspectives on this issue. Please stay with us.
Suleiman, Aya, and Tari, all from the Sulubawa clan, with a unique wealth of culture and deep love for cattle, which truly reflects their sense of family. But over time, everything changes, with no lands for grazing. Experience the incredible story of the Fulani people, loved ones they must protect, the journey they must take.
African fabric is finding its way to the global stage. But Nigeria is losing out on big textile spenders as the local industry faces imminent extinction. Behind me is the Arewa Textile Mill, established in 1963 and eventually closed down in 2004. From over 180 textile mills in the 70s, only about 25 mills now operate at less than 40% capacity.
I'm an employee of Arewa Textile PLC before it closed. After a month, I was just like a madman.
In a day, they laid off 4,500.
The once thriving sector struggles to compete with an annual import of $4 billion.
Smuggling is the order of the day. For manufacturers, we cannot compete.
We visit the nation's textile hubs to seek answers to why the sector has failed to return to its glory days despite government's intervention.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the Trust TV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search Trust TV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Nice to see you, sir. You got a 10-year-old son, a 12-year-old son. He's a shill boy. Yeah. And how did he get to that stage? You allowed it to happen. You allowed it to fester. It's like a cancer.
It's a failure of the family, a failure of the society, and a failure of governance.
We are still going into some other hideouts to see if any apprehensions will be made tonight.
To operate within the context of the law with much respect to human rights.
All right, thank you for staying with us. It's Daybreak, reaching you from Trust Television, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. Now, we will be going into our first discussion of the day, and Nigerians continue to groan as prices of foodstuff continue to, skyrocket. I would say it has reached, decade high as consumer demand increases. Other foodstuffs like fish, chicken, and milk remain volatile. We'll be taking a look at how the differentials, and what the numbers are showing, for us. But before we do that, Let's take a look at this report about a man who is now putting himself up for sale as a result of what he feels is, more hardship and difficulty, that he has experienced over the years. Take a look.
Meet Aliyu Idris, otherwise known as Na Idris, a 21-year-old indigene of Kaduna State, now in Kano, looking for who will buy him.
Ina so in sai da kaina sakamakon ina cikin rashin kuɗi. Ina da aikin yi, amma ba jari, shi yasa aikin ina fito kullum bana samu.
Aliyu decides to quit his tailoring business in Kaduna due to lack of capital. He tries a number of alternatives which also failed to work out for him, and then make his final move in order to free his family from hardship.
Nan na sai da kaina miliyan 20, za a ba 'yan uwana miliyan 10, sannan a jihar da aka sai da ni za a ba su miliyan 5 kuɗin rabanin. Sannan idan tallata aka sai ni, wanda ya tallata ya kawo mai siyana yana da 2 million a ciki. Sannan raguwan 3 million ɗin ni da na sai da kaina, wanda ya sai ni zan ba shi ita ya ije min halin yau da kullum, ko da wata ran zan gaba ina so a matsayina na bawan shi zan nemi alfarman shi in ce min wannan abu da kuɗin.
Although some offered Aliyu less than 20 million naira, but he declined, insisting that he can only sell himself at the cost of 20 million naira.
A Kano akwai mutanen da nake sare da ikirarin za su iya siyana. A cikin Kano akwai Dangote, shine mai kuɗin da kaf Afirka babu kaman shi. Sannan a Kano akwai Buwa. Sannan a Kano akwai mawaƙin da ake ji da shi mai suna Rara. Sannan a Kano akwai mai ɗan ƙwallon nan mai suna Ahmed Musa. To ina sare da koda a cikin zuwa na mutane kuɗin za a iya samu wanda zai siyana a garin Kano.
At the moment, Aliyu is still in the market in search for buyer to free himself from the difficulties of life. Idris Jibrin, Trust TV News, Kano.
Well, there you have it. Quite a hilarious story.
It's quite interesting,
It's very funny, but the guy, he meant business. He's not joking. For him to have, left Kaduna to Kano in search of someone who could buy him. I mean, it's really funny, for someone to even think that he could do that in 2021.
One other interesting thing, that caught my attention was the breakdown of the funds. Mm-hmm. When somebody actually buys him, there's a breakdown. He says 10 million to his family, and then 2 million to the agent who supplied the person to actually buy him.
So he's not all selfish after all.
And then there's also a cut for revenue, like tax, form of tax from the 20,000.
It takes someone who is really reasonable to even think about that, that a revenue should go to whichever state he gets sold. Exactly. I think that
when I saw that story, I wanted to laugh on the news yesterday, but
it's really hilarious, and he's very serious. But what could make someone think in this direction, to even think that he could do that? Now let's take a look at a breakdown of how the economy has fared in the past few months. I would say from the beginning of the year, this year. Now, statistics by the National Bureau of Statistics is showing, the spike, the inflation rate that we have experienced as far as food is concerned. Now, in January, you would find that 1 kg of tomatoes, costs barely about 115 naira. And now we are seeing in the last statistics that was taken in September, it's showing about 555 naira. Same goes for yam. 1 kg cost about 220 naira in January. Now it is going for about 500 naira. Beef, 1 kilo of beef was going for around 1,700 naira. Now it's going for 2,400, some places 5, and even 8 in some cases. The numbers are not looking good. Palm oil, for instance, also 1 kg from January was around 700 naira. And now we are talking about 850 naira. What exactly, is going on, some will say. We have an expert in the studio to give us answers to all of these things, and he is Dr. Samson Galadima Simon, and he is an economic expert to spotlight what's the cause for Nigeria's inflation, really. Good morning, and it's good to have you, Janice.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
First, let me get your reaction on the story of a man who is putting himself for sale at the cost of 20 million naira.
It breaks my heart. It's extremely sad in my view. But I understand. Times are really hard. Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world, and inflation is not letting off. It's getting worse. And food inflation is the worst of them all. If you look at it, the core inflation is in the region of 14%. The last data that came out from MBS, food inflation is higher than headline, is what is causing the headline inflation to go up. And people are struggling. Families are being beaten by this high inflation. People are really struggling. It's just so sad. But that's the situation we are in, and I don't think it's the right thing to try to sell yourself. It looks hilarious in a sadistic way, but I think it's not palatable at all. It's so sad.
So could you walk us through, to some of the causes, of the rising inflation we see in Nigeria?
All right. The Monetary Authority, the central bank, alongside the MBS, attributes our inflation to structural rigidities. The border closure, hike in the price of fuel, increase in electricity tariff, the insecurity, particularly in the food belt of Nigeria. But I think they're really oblivious. I think they're burying their heads in the sand. There is a big factor. According to Milton Friedman, the great monetary economist, he said inflation always and everywhere is a monetary phenomenon, in the sense that it is caused early, it can be caused early, but more rapid increase in the quantity of money than in output. The central bank has been abusing the ways and means. There is this, in the CBN Act 2007, it states that the central bank can actually come to the rescue of the government if they have short-term problem in their income. The government has short-term income problem. The central bank actually come to the rescue. But the law says it should be 5% of previous year's revenue. Ask me how much they have been doing it. They have been doing it way more than 5%. And the law says if the government does not pay back within the financial year, that power by central bank cannot be exercisable. That's the exact word that is being used. They have not been following that. So they have been pumping money. The printing press in the central bank is into overdrive. I know they are trying to stimulate growth. They are trying to see how the country, we were in a recession and they wanted us out of the recession. But one has to be cautious, unless if we want to go the way of Weimar Germany in the 1920s, when the mark was completely worthless, Venezuela or Zimbabwe. I know it's actually an exaggeration. We're not there yet. But if we continue on this trajectory, we are likely going to be in the same ranks as those other countries. So we are the borrowing again. I know in Keynesian economics, if you want to, the economy is on a downturn and you want to bring it out, maybe it's experiencing, it's receding, it's experiencing depression or whatever, and you want to bring it out, you can embark on expansionary monetary and fiscal policy, yes. But you don't just do it the way you feel like. It has to be applied with caution. You borrow, you print money, and make sure you don't just print money for frivolities. I don't mean like everything, the money that is being printed or the borrowing is being used for frivolities, but you only pay for things that can actually pay for themselves down the line. You don't just borrow to pay, for example, salaries. I know livelihoods are dependent on that, but you don't only look at the short run. You look at something that is sustainable, something that you can thumb your chest and say, I've actually done the right thing.
Do you think that this could be responsible for the weakening of the Naira?
Of course, is a big factor. Is a big factor. If not the major factor, is one of the most important factors. The Naira is being weakened, and we are an import-dependent economy. We depend on virtually for everything that is being imported. So that weakens the naira because we demand for the demand for foreign currencies by far outweigh the demand for a local currency. So people are willing to shell out as much as possible in naira in exchange for foreign currency. So that definitely will make the value of the naira to fall. And besides that, I was discussing with somebody, if you had, let's say, $1 million naira worth of money a year ago, and you saved it in dollars, the money would have almost doubled by now using parallel market exchange rates. But if you had saved your 1 million naira then, and you want to access it now to use it, the value would have gone down by almost 50%.
Right.
So Nigerians are wising up and they realize that keeping naira, actually saving in naira terms, may not actually be the best, and that actually exacerbates the problem because it increases the demand for dollar. So we have a serious problem, and we need to actually come up with solutions, not short-term, not quick fixes, not cosmetic solutions. We need to look at the long run. I know it's not actually easy because the situation is already there and you want to do everything possible to get out of it. But if we continue with this mindset, just looking for anything to be out of the situation will keep recurring. So we have to really sit down, and the thing is we need to be an exporting country. It's not just about, I was reading about additional. We tend to be, particularly for this government, it tends to be fixated on substituting imports. That means instead of importing, we see how we can produce on our own. There's nothing bad about that. But we should also try to promote export. And by promoting export, you don't just wake up like that and say you want to export yam from Nigeria. It's a process. And Nigeria is one of the harshest places to do business. We need to work on that. You need to encourage everybody to be enterprising, everybody to be productive. You need to stimulate the productive sectors of the economy. If you do that, then you can do a lot of value addition. It's not about exporting oil, exporting primary products. The world has graduated from that. We need a lot of value addition, and anything we want to export to the world, or if you want Nigerians to opt for made in Nigeria products, then if they are not exactly at the level or the quality of the ones we import, then it should be close. Okay. And the government has to set the pace. They have to lead by example. You cannot, like medical tourism, for example, is a serious drain on our reserves. Is not good for the naira. I'm not trying to say that Nigerians traveling abroad to study is bad. I know they are there to acquire skills. Human capital is also good, but if possible, if we can do these things here, I think that will help. That was my take.
Okay. Now, the World Bank has issued a statement saying Nigeria's inflation rate is fueling crime wave. What are your thoughts about that?
I agree. The inflation is really high. It's going through the roof, and there's nothing that impoverishes like inflation. Your purchasing power is completely chipped away at, and maybe the kind of life you are used to, you cannot afford it anymore. You talked about the prices of kilos of meat, of gari and others. And what people could afford then, they can hardly afford now. So some people resort to crime because they want to make ends meet, they want to keep body and soul together. So that actually fuels it because people hardly feed. Mind you, the food inflation component of our inflation is actually worse than the core and other parts of inflation. So to feed is even a problem for most people. So sometimes it's not everybody that is criminal minded. So it's, some crimes are, allow me to say, they are crimes of necessity. So you are compelled to. I'm not justifying it. Any form of crime is bad, but sometimes the situation encourages that. You know, if somebody does something and you feel he doesn't have reason for it, you know that person is just hell-bent on doing it. But if you're forced by circumstances, then the government or people around need to do something about those circumstances.
Okay.
I'm sure that will help the
All right.
situation.
Now, yesterday we saw the launching of the e-Naira by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and some are talking about diaspora remittances, going to be positively impacted by this. Do you see this in any way helping, the economy in terms of strengthening the Naira, for instance?
Well, the e-Naira is a good thing. It shows that we are forward-looking because the world is evolving. People are moving digital from the old ways of doing things. This is the fourth industrial revolution. Blockchain, digital transformation, and so on lead the way. So it's good. It makes transactions more fluid now because you have the e-Naira. It makes it more seamless than the way it used to be. But I don't think it will directly make the Naira to appreciate in value. If it will help, because we have basically three sources of getting foreign exchange in this country. Either we sell our oil, because that's a major export that we do, or diaspora remittances, or foreign direct investment. So if the e-Naira will help Nigerians living abroad to send money some more, that will help the value of the Naira. It can help to beef up our foreign reserves, and that's what the Monetary Authority used to define the international value of the currency. So maybe they have more money to spare, and even for the bureau, the change on the street, they have more people coming to exchange, and if the supply of the dollar can actually go up, that can help the value of the Naira to go up as well.
Okay, now still talking about the e-Naira. President Muhammadu Buhari said that it's going to rise Nigeria's GDP by $29 billion in 10 years. Is this feasible?
Well, it's a projection, and they have actually extrapolated, but it may not be exactly that. It may be higher, it may be lower, depending on certain things. There's what we call implicit theorizing in economics. Somebody just saying some things in a vacuum. It doesn't occur like that. There are conditions. So if these conditions are met, if all these assumptions happen, then that thing can happen, and possibly even better. It may be better than that. That possibility is there, but depending on doing the right things.
Okay, so what are some of these right things? What are some of the things that we need to put in place to achieve this?
All right, if you make the e-Naira more acceptable to Nigerians, if Nigerians believe the e-Naira is actually an alternative to, say, cryptocurrencies, if they have that confidence in it, and maybe foreign investors also have more confidence in the Naira because of the e-Naira. So some of these things have to happen for the e-Naira to be the powerful thing or tool that it is meant to be. But if Nigerians don't have confidence in it, foreign investors don't have, Nigerians are reluctant to join the bandwagon of using the e-Naira, then the chances of the e-Naira actually spurring growth are really slim.
All right. Now, earlier on, you talk about how difficult it is for people to do business in Nigeria. How can we, make the business environment much more attractive, for people, so that we can export more and be able to strengthen the Naira more and create more jobs and all of that?
There is a ranking, there is a metric for ease of doing business, and I know the Vice President has, as well as the committee he leads, has been trying to improve Nigeria's ease of doing business, and I think it's a noble cause. But we are basically paying lip service to that. We're doing next to nothing. What we have been doing is basically cosmetics. We are not ready to do the hard work. We're not ready to get our hands really dirty to have Nigeria out of the doldrums. I was a student at the school, and they invited President Buhari's economic management team chair, Professor Doyin Salami, and I asked him a question. I said, sir, I read a story in Financial Times, and I really felt bad as a patriot. I love my country despite Nigeria's feelings. is still my fatherland. If you can, let's say you leave Nigeria, like we say in Nigeria, you japa, you leave. You still have your loved ones here, so you are permanently connected to this country, whether you like it or not, and we have no choice than to be as patriotic as we can. And I told him, I read the story. The story said to import a container from China to, say, Lagos, for example, it takes, and then that container from a port in Lagos to a warehouse somewhere in Lagos, it costs more in money, and it takes more time to take it from the port to the warehouse as it is from China to Nigeria to the port. And I said, people are sleeping. As a leader, I don't think I can sleep if I read such a story. But it seems we are so numb to all these things now, and we see them as normal. I think there's nothing that demonstrates the harshness of our doing business like that. It should not be difficult to take a container from the port to a warehouse somewhere within the same city. It shouldn't be. And the people in power, the advisors, they all know the right things. But knowing the right thing is one thing. Then doing it is another thing. I think there is no will for people to get things done. I mean, for the leadership to get things done. If the political will is there, I'm not saying it's easy. Anybody that says it's easy may not be true honest. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you're determined, as this popular saying that where there is a will, there is a way. If you're determined, I'm not saying that Nigeria will suddenly become the best place to do business overnight. No. It takes a lot of grinding, a lot of hard work. But if we can start, and we should look at the long haul, don't only look at what you can get immediately, like Okonjo-Iweala the other day was talking about our tariffs being high, and that discourages trade between Nigeria and other countries. So these are things that need to be done, but I don't think anybody is serious about doing these things.
Okay. Now, with the way our economy is going, do you think Nigeria has an economic recovery plan?
Yes, they have an economic recovery and growth plan, as they say. And I think, in all fairness to them, they're doing what they think will bring Nigeria take Nigeria out of the woods. But we are still playing the ostrich. We still don't want to do the hard things that need doing. Diversifying the economy, that's the way out of Nigeria's situation. As long as we don't diversify, and what I mean by diversifying in terms of our exports, because our economy as a whole is highly diversified. The oil that we're so dependent on for our foreign exchange earnings and for government income is 90% of foreign exchange earnings, in the region of 90%. For government income is around 50%. So that's where the diversification is. But in terms of GDP, oil is less than 10% of our economy. So in terms of GDP, our economy is highly diversified. But when you look at those things, that's where we have issues. And that's why we need to diversify the economy. We need to look for ways to export other things besides oil. And even the diaspora remittances, if we want to encourage Nigerians living abroad to bring in their money, we need to maybe allow them, give them the rights to vote, for example, and make it very easy for them to bring their money. And our security, the insecurity in Nigeria is not helping matters. Investors are taking their money. If you look at our balance of payment, it's not really favorable. It's actually in the negative territories. So we need to work on all these things. If we can actually work on them, I think that will really go a long way. Okay.
Now, in your opinion and your observation of the economy as we have it now, what are the areas that, areas like, for instance, in infrastructure that need urgent attention to be able to create this, economic environment?
There are actually so many things, but there is one that is actually overarching, that is actually overriding. Power. If we can fix the problem of power, I think, if you ask me to just pick one thing, I think that should be it. There are other things I'm not disputing. There are many things that we need to do. But the most important thing, the linchpin, if you ask me, is fixing the problem of power. And if we have a problem, as a country, if we feel we cannot fix power on our own, why can't we go cab in hand to, let's say, General Electric, or we go to Tesla? I'm not saying that those are the only options. There are so many options that we can explore. But these are the ones that I know they have been successful. Why can't we approach them? Like when they were trying to privatize power in Nigeria, they sold it to politicians. What can a politician do to fix the problem of power? So that's why I said we're not ready to do the hard work.
You know, and for as long as I can remember, we've been talking about this power issue. But before we will talk more, on these issues, let's go on a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll take a look at other, dimensions to the conversation about Nigeria's economic growth. Please stay with us.
Suleiman, Aya, and Tari, all from the Sulubawa clan, with a unique wealth of culture and deep love for cattle, which truly reflects their sense of family. But over time, everything changes, with no lands for grazing. Experience the incredible story of the Fulani people, loved ones they must protect, the journey they must take.
African fabric is finding its way to the global stage. But Nigeria is losing out on big textile spenders as the local industry faces imminent extinction. Behind me is the Arewa textile mill, established in 1963 and eventually closed down in 2004. From over 180 textile mills in the 70s, only about 25 mills now operate at less than 40% capacity.
I'm an employee of Arewa Textile PLC before it closed. After a month, I was just like a madman.
In a day, they laid off 4,500.
The once thriving sector struggles to compete with an annual import of $4 billion.
Smuggling is the order of the day. For manufacturers, we cannot compete.
We visit the nation's textile hubs to seek answers to why the sector has failed to return to its glory days despite government's intervention.
All right, thank you for staying with us. It's Daybreak reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja, and we've been discussing, recent happenings and the rising cost of living in Nigeria. Nigerians have continued to grow, and in fact, we're seeing a man who is putting himself on sale as a result of what he considered difficulty in trying to make ends meet. And we have in the studio Dr. Simon Galadima in the studio, an economist, giving us perspectives on these recent happenings. Now, Nigeria has borrowed a lot of money from China in the name of investing in capital, projects and all of that. But again, some experts like you have raised reservations about some of the conditions, of getting those loans and all of that. Do you think that Nigeria is relating fairly with some of these countries, like China, for instance?
Actually, we have been binge borrowing for a while now, and domestically we have been, internationally, and not only from China, from World Bank, we have issued Euro bonds on several occasions. So those people, like the Chinese, they don't run a charity. What they do with those loans is to pursue their own interests. And China is well known for unfair trading practices, businesses, they're out to get you. And they are really efficient in what they do. The Chinese are very efficient. They are really result-oriented, and they are no nonsense. So if they give you money, they expect you to abide by the guidelines. And if you don't do, they may confiscate your pot. I jokingly told somebody that maybe if they confiscate our pot, it may be to our favor. They will run it better than we do. Sadly, I'm not proud to say it, but they will definitely run it better than us. And the truth is, they may use it to project their own national interest, not our own national interest, to push for their own agenda, not our own agenda. So we have borrowed from China, but the borrowings from China might have been exaggerated by the, I don't know whether media or the general population. We owe probably more from Eurobonds and multilateral agencies than China. So the Chinese feel that it serves their interest to lend money to us, and we should not just get carried away because they're always willing to give us money. We have to look at what that money can do. If I'm borrowing $2 billion from the Chinese, let's say to build a railway from Kano to Maradi, will that railway pay for itself? Is it worth it economically? Is it economically viable? Like Sanusi will say, you don't build a railway for people to go for a wedding. It doesn't make sense. You have to look at the economics, how much it's going to cost you, not only now, but down the line, and then what you can get from it. So you have to weigh, you have to do cost-benefit analysis, and if you feel it's worth it, it can actually pay for itself, not the one that you'll be collecting money for generations yet unborn to come and pay because you have not used it. But in all honesty, the way we are borrowing is not sustainable at all. It's not sustainable, and we need to do a lot of things. I know that it's not popular to say that we need to work on, let's say, VAT. I know people don't like to be taxed, but we are living in denial if we don't want to be taxed, and then government borrows, inflation goes up, our currency is devalued, and then somebody, I think it was Milton Friedman, that said inflation is taxation without representation. Because if they tax you, I remember when government wanted to increase VAT, they said they are going to use it to do certain things. But when inflation, when there is a general increase in the price level, is indirectly taxation. But you are not being told what the money is being used for. So I think Nigeria has one of the lowest revenue to GDP ratios in the world. So our taxation is poor. I don't know if it's from the rate or from the agencies actually collecting the money. There are so many problems along the line, and we need to look at all these things if we were serious about spurring economic growth in Nigeria.
Okay. Well, some experts, are of the opinion that it is lack of credible monetary policy anchors that we have in Nigeria that is failing, the elevated inflation rates we're seeing. Some are saying that CBN is doing so much at the same time.
Yes, they have a point. The Monetary Authority has actually been too powerful, and I think it may be a bit controversial to say this, but I think the independence of the central bank is a bit suspect. I think the Monetary Authority is too eager to pander to the government. I know our own climate may not actually be the best in terms of rule of law, but I was discussing with somebody and I was being critical about the central bank, and the person said I should put myself in that position. I said, yes, I understand where they're coming from, but you should strike a balance. I know they're trying to help, but the way they are going about it is not actually the best, and that indirectly undermines the entirety of the central bank, sadly, because you print money to give to the government, you embark on anchor borrowers, you try to give money to the needy, you give money to banks when they are experiencing difficulties. But you have to look at these things, that you don't just give money to farmers to farm. You have to be sure that if I pump, let's say, 100 billion into the economy, production will also go up by at least 100 billion. If the production doesn't go up by 100 billion, let's say it goes up by 50 billion, it's actually going to be inflationary.
Right.
It's going to cause inflation. So,
all right. Now, government is talking about removal of fuel subsidy, for instance, to enable them, invest in other projects and all of that. And that conversation has lingered for quite a while. Some people say, look, it's for the benefit of Nigerians that this subsidy is removed and all of that. How do you see the removal of this subsidy impacting on the livelihoods of Nigerians? Because it automatically means that the cost of the price of fuel will jack up, definitely, and Nigerians will have to be paying for that. How would that impact on incomes, low-income earners, for instance?
I'm actually an advocate for subsidy removal, and my reason for that is that the resources being used for subsidy are better utilized elsewhere. But when you remove subsidy and you don't utilize the resources as efficiently as you should use them, then you actually have a double whammy on your hands. You have punished the population by making them to pay more for fuel that they use, and then the money that you are taking away to cover for that subsidy, you don't use it well. So if, in all honesty, you take away that subsidy and then you direct the money to, say, fixing the problem of power, for example, helping with the insecurity that we have and other infrastructure, if in all honesty that's what you are going to do, then by all means, please remove the subsidy. It's going to have it has downside. I'm not saying removing subsidy, apart from the direct burden on the population, is going to be inflationary as well. So it's going to, but I think the benefits by far outweigh the costs if things will be done rightly.
All right. Now, let's take a look at other issues here. Another issue that is of importance that we've touched just a bit earlier on is the issue of taxation and all of that. How do we, expand our tax net, in Nigeria to have more Nigerians pay tax? Because at the moment, it looks like just a few pay the tax, and it's becoming more like a burden.
Yes, I remember saying that we have one of the lowest tax revenue to GDP in the world, and I think it should be something that would stop, let's say, the chief executive or the chair at the FIRS from sleeping. He should be thinking about how to do it, or at least the Minister of Finance. You have to bring more people into the tax net, yes, but the people that are paying, they have to see that what they are paying is actually being used properly. If people don't have confidence that when they pay, the money will be used, they will look for ways to evade taxes and even avoid taxes. But if I'm sure that when I pay my taxes and I will actually see it, I think people will be encouraged to do that. Nobody likes to pay taxes, but if you're convinced that it's actually the right thing to do, that is actually good. Nigerians are patriotic. I know patriotism sometimes does not pay, sometimes. I'm not disputing anywhere in the world, not only in Nigeria. But largely, you know that it serves your interest in the long run to do certain things right. And I feel many Nigerians are that reasonable.
All right, well, let's go on a quick break now, and then when we come back, our discussion will continue on the program. Please stay with us.
Get latest updates on current topical issues and breaking news by downloading the Trust TV mobile app on your Android devices. Go online, click Google Play Store, search Trust TV, install the app, and get doses of unfiltered information on happenings all over the world in your pocket. Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
Nice to see you, sir. You got a 10-year-old son, a 12-year-old son. He's a shill boy. Yeah. And how did he get to that stage? You allowed it to happen. You allowed it to fester. It's like a cancer.
it's a failure of the family, a failure of the society, and a failure of governance.
We are still going into some other hideouts to see if any apprehensions will be made tonight.
To operate within the context of the law with much respect to human rights.
All right, thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, you're watching Daybreak, reaching you live from the nation's capital in Abuja. I'm Ayuba Ile, and of course, I'm in the studio with Dr. Simon Galadima, and he's given us thoughts on the recent happenings as far as Nigeria's inflation is concerned. Now, on your final thoughts now, how do we, ensure that we don't continue to experience this, spike in the cost of things in the market? How can Nigerians at least have some level of comfortable life to be able to, feed properly, in summary?
All right. Inflation is actually a huge problem, and small amount of inflation is actually good for an economy when it's single digit. In developed countries, the ideal level of inflation for them is 2%. Ours is 6 to 9%. So it's actually good for an economy because it encourages people to spend, and it spurs demand and growth eventually. But when inflation is extremely high, like when it's double digit like we're experiencing at the moment, is actually bad for the economy. It makes investors to lose confidence. It makes consumers as well to lose confidence. And right now, what the Naira needs is for more people to believe in it, not less. So the best approach for this is to increase the productive base of the economy. Now, we need to be more productive than we are already. We need to do a lot of value addition. We should not only talk about import substitution, but we should find ways to promote export. I jokingly always tell my friends that if I'm in position of power, because the government can only do as much, so there's a limit to what the government can do. Mm-hmm. But when you make the environment really friendly, you make it really conducive for economic prosperity, the work will be done by others. What you just need to do is just to make it really friendly. Making Nigeria the easiest place to do business. There are metrics, there are authorities that have all these measurements, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You go to, I know that the ease of doing business might have been discredited by what happened when the current chief executive of IMF was at the World Bank, a land that the Chinese influenced it, and because they have fear now that people no longer have confidence in ease of doing business, they have stopped it. But the metrics are there, and the metrics do not change. They have not been compromised. Mm-hmm. So you know the right things. So look at the right things, and if it's not something that a layman can relate to, get somebody that really understands it. And as a government, push it with all of your might. Mm. If a country like if people like the Chinese can be so conscious, can be so determined about having good rankings for ease of doing business, what do you expect for a country like ours that we're still down there? I think we need to do something about that.
All right. All right, then. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show and sharing your thoughts with us on the program. We are really, really super happy to have you around. Hopefully you'll join us again for another time on the program.
Yes, I also had some fun. I had a nice time.
Yes. We've been speaking with Dr. Simon Galadima, and he's been sharing with us perspectives on the recent rise in inflation in the country. Now, we will be taking a look at sports in 60 seconds. Okay, I just got information that we'll be bringing sports later. But for now, we'll have to end the show. My name is Ayuba Ilya. Thank you so much for watching, and we will have you join us again tomorrow for another time on the program. Bye for now.